Housekeeper framed by billionaire's son, her wet notebook exposed the truth. At 9:18 on a rainy Thursday night, Keisha Vance, a 48-year-old hotel housekeeper in Chicago, signed the turn-down log for room 1412 and wrote one sentence no one wanted to read: "Guest safe, already open on arrival." By morning, Harrison Sterling, the billionaire owner's son, told security she had stolen a diamond necklace from a senator's wife. But Keisha had kept every room log for 6 months because the hotel had been shaving housekeepers' hours and changing records after midnight. This is the story of one black woman blamed because she was easy to doubt, one rich white man protected because he was expensive to question, and the sabotage email that turned a private lie into public evidence. Stay with Keisha for this one. Because the question is not only whether she can prove she did not steal. The question is whether a powerful family can be forced to correct a lie after they have already made the public believe it. The question this story asks is simple, but not easy. What does a truthful record mean when the people with money can decide which records become official? Keisha did not have a press office, a family attorney, or a last name stamped on the side of a building. She had a work badge with a fading photograph, a bus pass with 2 rides left, and a blue notebook soft from use. Harrison had cameras, lawyers, security guards, guest relations staff, and the kind of family reputation that turned doubt into a privilege. He did not need to prove Keisha was guilty. He only needed to make her look believable as the person to blame. That was why the first hour mattered. The room log, the open safe, the keycard summary that left out the raw entries, the payroll edits that had been happening in the dark for months, the detail about Harrison by the service elevator, the note on Keisha's door. None of those pieces looked large by themselves. But a lie built by powerful people often fails because it touches too many small truths. And Keisha, because of a life spent being underestimated, had learned to keep the small truths where no one could throw them away. Keisha Vance had learned to write things down before she learned to trust anybody with power. She was born on the south side of Chicago, raised in the back half of a 2-bedroom apartment above a laundromat, and by the time she was 17, she could fold a fitted sheet faster than most people could find the corners. Her mother, a woman named Eloise, cleaned office buildings at night. Her father drove a delivery route until his back gave out, then spent the rest of his life apologizing for being in pain, as if pain were a debt he had failed to pay. Keisha did not grow up thinking hard work made you safe. She grew up knowing hard work made you useful, and in a world built on racial hierarchies, useful black people were often the first people blamed when rich white people needed a story to stay clean. When she was 23, she had been working at a downtown banquet hall when a cash box went missing from a wedding. The white manager looked at the black servers first, then the dishwashers, then the cleaning crew. Nobody looked at the groom's white brother until 2 weeks later, when a bank camera showed him depositing the same marked bills. By then, Keisha had already lost the job, her reputation tarnished by a whisper campaign that followed her to her next employer. Her mother, who rarely raised her voice but possessed a quiet, unbreakable authority, handed her a blue spiral notebook that night and said, "Baby, when people do not want to see you, make the paper see you. When they try to erase your name, you write it down so deep they cannot scrub it out." Eloise did not teach that lesson like a speech. She taught it at the kitchen table after midnight, with her work shoes still on, and her fingers smelling faintly of ammonia, while the television muttered weather reports to a room that never got fully warm in winter. She would take pay envelopes apart and smooth every slip with the back of a spoon. She wrote down the building name, the floor, the hours, the supervisor, and whether anyone had asked her to stay late without changing the timesheet. Keisha used to think her mother was being too careful, the way children sometimes mistake survival skills for fear. Later, she understood that Eloise was not writing because she trusted paper more than people. She was writing because people in power often trusted paper only after it could no longer be ignored. There was one night Keisha never forgot. She was 12, doing homework beside a basket of laundry when Eloise came home without her regular check. The cleaning company said there had been a clerical adjustment. That was the phrase they used. Not theft, not mistake. A clerical adjustment. Eloise stood in the manager's office the next morning with 3 weeks of her own notes and the key sign-in sheets she had copied by hand. The manager laughed at first. Then he saw the dates matched the building alarm record. He paid her by the end of the week, but he never looked at her the same way again. Keisha remembered that look. It was not respect exactly. It was the discomfort of a man realizing that the woman he considered invisible had been counting. Years later, when Keisha had Malik, she found herself repeating her mother's habits without meaning to. She wrote down daycare pickup times, bus delays, prescription costs, rent receipts, field trip fees. She kept a folder for Malik's school forms, another for medical bills, another for every job she had worked since he was born. Malik teased her sometimes, calling her the family archive, but when a landlord once claimed she had paid rent 2 days late, Keisha opened a shoebox, found the money order stub, and had the late fee removed before dinner. She did not feel triumphant. She felt tired. A life should not require that much proof just to be believed. Keisha kept that notebook long after the cardboard cover softened and the wire rings bent out of shape. She taped the spine twice. She wrote dates in careful block letters. She recorded extra rooms, skipped breaks, broken locks, guest complaints, linen shortages, supervisor initials, and every time the hotel's time clock rounded down 12 minutes like 12 minutes did not belong to a human life. On the first page, in her mother's handwriting, was the line Keisha repeated when she was tired enough to cry. A name is not cleared until the record is corrected. She said it when her son Malik came home from high school with college brochures she could not afford, looking at her with eyes that asked if they would ever have the same opportunities as the white kids in his advanced placement classes. She said it when her younger sister Tamika asked why Keisha never threw away old pay stubs, hoarding them in a shoebox under her bed like they were gold bars. She said it when her hands ached so badly in winter, from the harsh chemical cleaners that she had to run hot water over her knuckles before opening a bottle of detergent. And she said it quietly, under her breath, the first time she entered room 1412 and saw the guest safe hanging open, the velvet jewelry pouch on the desk, and the senator's white wife laughing in the bathroom, with the shower running, unaware that somebody had already turned a small metal door into a trap. The blue notebook had become ugly in the way useful things become beautiful. Its cardboard corners were rounded from being pushed into lockers and purses. One coffee stain crossed 3 pages from a winter morning when Keisha had worked a double shift after another housekeeper slipped on wet marble by the spa. She had written over the stain anyway. January 17th, room 906. Minibar glass broken before entry. Guest asleep, reported to floor supervisor, no response. Her handwriting was steady even when her hands were not. On the inside back cover, Malik had once drawn a small cartoon of his mother wearing a cape made out of bedsheets. He had been 9 years old. Keisha had almost torn it out because she did not want him to think heroism meant exhaustion. But she kept it because the drawing reminded her that children do not measure parents by money first. They measure them by whether they stand back up. That notebook was not supposed to become evidence in a case that could shake a billionaire hotel family. It was supposed to be a private defense against small erasures. A room added after lunch, a missed break, a supervisor saying they had never been told about a leaking sink, a guest accusing a housekeeper of moving a watch that later turned up under a pillow. Little things. The kind of things people with offices call misunderstandings when they happen to workers and emergencies when they happen to guests. The Sterling Grand Hotel was the kind of place that smelled like white lilies, old money, and lemon oil polished into wood no guest ever had to clean. It sat on the Magnificent Mile, a towering monument to wealth and exclusivity. Its owner, Richard Sterling, was a billionaire hotel developer with a careful public face. He gave speeches about service and diversity. He donated to hospitality schools. He liked being photographed beside scholarship winners, whose mothers did the kind of work his executives called labor allocation. But the person who truly ran the Chicago property was his son, Harrison Sterling. The Sterling Grand employed 321 people on paper, but the building ran on a smaller number of bodies stretched across too many rooms. On busy weekends, housekeeping moved like a quiet army through back corridors that guests never saw. Women pushed carts stacked higher than their shoulders. Men from maintenance carried tool bags through service elevators that smelled like steam and old carpet. Kitchen porters came out of banquet rooms with wet aprons and eyes red from heat. Everyone knew which doors made noise, which supervisors would sign a correction without reading, which cameras pointed at the right angle, and which guest complaints could cost a worker an entire week of pay. The hotel handbook said all employees were valued members of the Sterling family. Keisha had read that sentence during orientation and felt nothing. Families did not schedule people for 8 rooms, then add 4 more after the clock said their shift was over. Families did not ask a woman to smile at guests after cutting the hours she needed to keep health insurance. Families did not call missing wages a discrepancy and missing jewelry a crime. But the handbook was glossy, and the lobby was bright, and the Sterling name was attached to charity galas where every speech sounded polished enough to hide the laundry carts moving behind the walls. Harrison Sterling understood that difference better than most people gave him credit for. He was not merely spoiled. Spoiled men waste power. Harrison used it. He had been trained by expensive schools, boardrooms, and public relations coaches to sound reasonable while asking for unreasonable things. When he walked the employee floors, he did not call people by the wrong names. He called them by their first names with a small, controlled warmth, as if familiarity were a management tool. He remembered who had a sick mother who needed overtime, who had a son applying for college, who had a landlord problem, who was afraid of losing insurance. That knowledge made him look attentive. It also made him dangerous. 3 weeks before the senator's fundraising weekend, Harrison had stood in front of the board and promised labor optimization without service decline. Those were the words in the board packet. In practice, it meant shaving minutes from shifts, stretching room quotas, and hiding the pressure inside software reports, clean enough to make suffering look mathematical. Richard Sterling wanted proof that Harrison could protect margins and handle political guests. The senator's wife, Evelyn Markham, was not just a guest. She was married to a man who could help Sterling Properties win favorable development hearings in 2 states. Her diamond necklace was insured for a number Keisha could not imagine, but Harrison did not fear the necklace. He feared the headline. Harrison did not shout. That was what made him dangerous. He smiled with one side of his mouth, spoke in soft sentences, and used phrases like brand protection, guest confidence, and operational discipline while deciding who kept insurance, who lost shifts, and who became disposable when wealthy white guests needed reassurance. Harrison had a motive bigger than one necklace. 3 weeks before the accusation, the Sterling Grand Board had approved a national expansion deal. Harrison wanted to be named president of the luxury division. His father, Richard, had not signed the promotion yet. The senator's fundraising weekend was supposed to prove Harrison could manage important guests without scandal. A stolen necklace from a political donor's wife would make him look careless. A black housekeeper with a thin bank account, a worn uniform, and no lawyer would make the scandal look solved. So Harrison controlled the room before Keisha ever walked into his office. He had security pull only the hallway footage after Keisha entered. He had the front desk print a keycard summary, not the raw access log. He told the executive housekeeper to remove Keisha from the schedule until confidence was restored. He told human resources to classify the meeting as administrative, not disciplinary, so Keisha could not bring a coworker, knowing that a black woman alone in a room with 3 white executives was a dynamic designed to break her spirit. Then he called her into a glass office overlooking the lobby, where guests drank $12 coffee beneath chandeliers shaped like falling rain. Keisha stood with her notebook pressed against her stomach, feeling the familiar, cold weight of systemic bias settling over her shoulders. In that glass office, Harrison did not begin with an accusation, because accusation would have given Keisha something solid to answer. He began with atmosphere, a folder on the desk, security close enough to be noticed. The human resources director taking notes with a pen that did not pause, a public relations assistant standing against the wall, pretending she was only there to observe. Every detail told Keisha the hotel had already chosen its direction and wanted her to walk into it quietly. The executive housekeeper, Marlene Dodd, looked at Keisha only once, then looked down at the folder. Marlene had started as a room attendant 20 years earlier and climbed just high enough to forget how the lower rungs felt under the foot. She was not rich, she was not powerful in the sterling way. But she had a schedule board, and in a hotel, the person who controls schedules controls rent, medicine, daycare, and whether an employee can attend a son's school meeting. Harrison used people like Marlene because they made harm look internal, practical, ordinary. Marlene said, "Keisha, maybe there was confusion about what you saw." Keisha turned toward her. There was not confusion. The safe door was open when I entered, and I wrote it before anyone complained. The human resources director made a small note. Keisha heard the scratch of the pen and understood the trap. Calm becomes cold, fear becomes guilt, anger becomes aggression. A black woman in a room like that must measure every breath because someone else is always translating her body for the record. "Keisha," he said, folding his hands on the desk, his voice dripping with faux sympathy. "No one wants this to become ugly." She stood tall, her spine straight, refusing to shrink, then read the room log. "We have read enough to know you were the last staff member assigned before the complaint," Harrison replied, his tone shifting from sympathetic to authoritative. "I wrote that the safe was open when I arrived," Keisha said, her voice steady, projecting a calm she did not entirely feel. Harrison's smile did not move. People write many things when they are afraid. Sometimes the mind plays tricks when confronted with temptation. Keisha looked through the glass wall and saw 2 white security guards waiting near the elevators, not blocking her, just standing where guests could see them. That was how power worked when it had good shoes and the right skin color. It did not have to touch you to make everyone believe you were already caught. It just had to place you in the narrative of the criminal. And if you have ever watched a quiet worker get blamed because defending them would inconvenience someone important, remember this moment. The first punishment was not the suspension. The first punishment was the story Harrison made other people willing to believe. "I am not afraid of the truth," she said, meeting his eyes without flinching. "I am afraid of what you will call the truth before you check it. I am afraid of the story you have already written for me because of the color of my skin and the uniform I wear." Harrison leaned back, a flicker of annoyance crossing his carefully composed face. A person in your position should be careful with accusations. By the time Keisha reached home, the rumor had outrun the bus. It had gone through the staff text chain, through a cousin of a banquet server, through Malek's school, through the church prayer list in the soft, poisonous form of concern. "Is she all right? Did something happen downtown? I heard there was jewelry. I heard security walked her out." Nobody said, "I heard the hotel cleared her." Nobody said, "I heard the billionaire's son checked the raw log." Rumors know which direction power wants them to run. Her apartment was small but carefully kept, a braided rug by the door, 2 framed school certificates over the radiator, a chipped bowl full of keys, coins, and folded receipts. The kitchen table had a wobble that Malik fixed every few months with cardboard under one leg. That night, the table held the financial aid packet, the wet umbrella, 2 cups of reheated soup, and the blue notebook. It looked like too little furniture to hold so much fear. Malik tried to act grown because children of working parents learn to read bills before they are ready. He had a tall, narrow face like his father, who had left when Malik was 5 and sent money when guilt caught up with him. Malik did not ask whether they could afford a lawyer because he already knew. He asked whether the truth would be enough. Keisha wanted to say yes immediately, the way mothers are supposed to protect children from the shape of the world. Instead, she looked at the notebook and answered honestly, "The truth is enough only if we can make it impossible to ignore." A person in your position, Keisha countered, should be careful with records. Because paper remembers what people try to forget. For the first time, his face changed. Not much. Just enough to show that he had not expected her to fight back with words instead of tears. By noon, Keisha's badge stopped opening the staff entrance. By 2, a suspension letter arrived by email stating that she had been placed on unpaid leave pending an internal investigation. By 4, her son Malik texted her from school. "Mom, someone said you got arrested at work. Is it true?" Keisha sat on a bus bench in the rain and stared at the words until the screen blurred. She had not been arrested. That almost made it worse. A public arrest would have a document, a paper trail of injustice that could be fought. A rumor just traveled through the black community and the white community alike, mutating until it became a shape people recognized and accepted. It became the truth, without the burden of proof. That night, she opened the blue notebook at her kitchen table. Malik sat across from her with a college financial aid packet between them. His face stiff in the way black children become adult when they are trying not to need comfort, trying to protect their parents from the harsh realities of the world. "Did you do anything wrong?" he asked, his voice quiet. "No," Keisha said firmly. "Then why does everybody sound like you did? Why does Mr. Harrison sound like you did?" Keisha touched the notebook's taped spine. Because some people can afford to be believed before they are honest. Because when a white man points a finger, the world assumes the black woman he is pointing at must have done something to deserve it. But we are going to fight it, Malik. We are going to use the paper. The next morning, the hotel sent a courier with a settlement envelope. Inside was a check for $8,000, a neutral employment reference, and a confidentiality agreement stating that Keisha would not discuss the incident, the guest complaint, hotel security procedures, payroll practices, or any internal document. $8,000 could keep Malik's application plans alive. It could pay the overdue electric bill, fix the brakes on the Toyota, and stop the collection calls from the urgent care clinic. It was hush money designed to make her go away quietly, to accept the narrative that she was a thief who had been shown mercy. The courier did not look at Keisha when she opened the door. He wore a dark jacket with the hotel crest and held the envelope in both hands like it contained something clean. Keisha signed for it because she had learned not to refuse paper. Refusing paper let powerful people say they tried to communicate. Accepting paper let her know exactly what they wanted. The check was printed on heavy stock. $8,000 looked different when it was not a number on a bill. It looked like brakes fixed before winter. It looked like Malik's application fees. It looked like insulin for Tamika's husband, who had been stretching his refill because insurance had reset its deductible. It looked like the electric bill folded under a magnet shaped like a peach. It looked like 1 month of breathing. That was what made hush money cruel. It did not tempt people because they were weak. It tempted them because survival is expensive. Harrison knew that. His legal team knew it. They had not chosen 8,000 at random. It was high enough to matter, and low enough to prove they still thought Keisha was cheap. Keisha spread the papers across the kitchen table and read every page aloud. She read the confidentiality clause, the non-disparagement clause, the release of claims, the sentence about no internal notes contradicting the hotel's account. At that sentence, Malik looked up. "How can they ask you to say that if it is not true?" Keisha placed one finger on the page. "They are not asking me to say it because it is true. They are asking me to say it so it can become official." Keisha read the agreement 3 times. Then she found the sentence that made her throat go cold. The employee acknowledges that no room log, time record, or internal note contradicts the hotel's account. That was not a settlement. That was a broom. It was meant to sweep her name, her hours, and every other black and brown woman's missing time into the same quiet pile. It was meant to erase her existence from the official record of the Sterling Grand. This is where many people would stop, and no honest person should judge them too quickly. Because bills are real, children are real, and fear is real. But a good story about dignity does not ask whether silence is tempting. It asks what silence costs after the check is gone. Her sister Tamika begged her to think carefully. Keisha, I know what Mama would say, but Mama is not here and Malik needs money now. You cannot eat pride. You cannot pay rent with a clear conscience if they take the house. Keisha did not argue. She did not preach. She only turned the blue notebook around and showed Tamika the first page. A name is not cleared until the record is corrected. Tamika wiped her eyes, the frustration and fear evident on her face. And what if correcting it costs you everything? What if they bury you, Keisha? They have lawyers, they have money, they have the police on speed dial. Keisha closed the notebook. Then I start with what is still mine. I start with the truth. Rock bottom did not come with dramatic music. It came in small official pieces. Unpaid leave, health insurance warning, a landlord notice about late rent, a final reminder from Malik's community college program, a text from a coworker saying management had told staff not to discuss room 1412, a warning that carried the implicit threat of termination, a white neighbor looking away in the laundry room, suddenly finding the floor very interesting when Keisha walked by. The landlord notice came in a plain white envelope, which somehow made it worse. Bright colors warn you. Plain envelopes pretend to be ordinary until they take the floor out from under you. Keisha stood by the mailbox and read the amount twice. Late rent, administrative fee. Notice of possible filing, not eviction yet, but the word possible has a way of becoming a shadow over every room. At the grocery store, she put back oranges and bought rice, beans, and the cheapest chicken thighs in the case. At the pharmacy, she asked whether Malik's allergy medicine had a lower-cost version. On the bus, 2 seats behind her, a woman from church whispered too softly for strangers and too loudly for kindness. Keisha kept her face forward. She had survived whispers before, but whispers become heavier when your child has to carry them into school. On the 3rd day of unpaid leave, her staff portal password stopped working. On the 4th day, the hotel sent a benefits notice warning that unpaid status could affect coverage if the leave extended past the end of the month. On the 5th day, Malik did not go to basketball practice because he said he had homework, but Keisha saw him at the table searching part-time jobs. He was 17. He should have been thinking about college essays, not whether his mother had enough money to fight a rich man's lie. Then came the paper bag. The bag changed the room. Not because the notebook was damaged. Paper could dry, ink could survive. What changed was the knowledge that someone had gone into her locker, touched her mother's handwriting, carried her private record out of the hotel, and brought the threat to her home. The note about Malik was meant to turn love into leverage. It was meant to tell her that power knew where she slept. For a moment, Tamika wanted to call the police. Then she stopped herself because everyone in that hallway understood the question before anyone said it. What would the report say? A wet notebook. A note with no signature. A black woman already rumored to be a thief accusing a billionaire hotel of intimidation. The truth did not become less true because it was hard to report, but Keisha knew a report written badly could become another weapon in Harrison's hand. So she photographed the bag before touching it. She photographed the note beside a ruler from Malik's school supplies. She photographed the torn cover and the water on the floor. Then she placed the notebook on towels and began saving pages. That was the first step back even before she had words for it. And then, on Friday evening, Keisha found a paper bag outside her apartment door. Inside was the blue notebook, wet from rain, its cover torn, its pages swollen and warped. A note was clipped to it. Let this go before your son pays for your pride. For 1 minute, Keisha stood in the hallway without breathing. Not because the note scared her, because someone from the hotel had gone into her locker, taken her notebook, and believed the damage would make her smaller. They had not understood her mother. They had not understood the generations of black women who had survived by holding on to the truth when the world tried to strip it from them. They thought destroying the physical book would destroy the memory, the evidence, the resolve. Keisha carried the notebook inside, laid each wet page on the kitchen table, and turned on the ceiling fan. Malik brought paper towels without being asked. They worked in silence, page by page, pressing water out of 6 months of careful handwriting. It took hours, her fingers cramped, her eyes burned, but she did not stop until every word was legible again. At 11:30 that night, Keisha did her small restart. She took out her phone, opened a blank document, and began typing a timeline from memory. Room 1412. Turn down assignment posted at 8:54 in the evening. Key card accepted at 9:16 in the evening. Safe open on arrival. Guest in bathroom, velvet pouch visible. Called floor supervisor at 9:21 in the evening. Supervisor did not answer. Signed log at 9:24 in the evening. Exited room at 9:32 in the evening. Saw Harrison Sterling near service elevator at 9:35 in the evening. The timeline did not come out smoothly. Trauma scrambles the order of things because fear leaves bright marks in some places and dark holes in others. Keisha wrote one sentence, stopped, closed her eyes, and rebuilt the night from sounds. The elevator chime on 14, the room's service tray outside 1410, the smell of expensive perfume in the hall, the senator's aide speaking fast into a phone near the service vestibule, Harrison's voice, low and impatient, a white access card held between 2 fingers. The small click of the safe door when she touched it with one gloved hand and realized it was already loose. She wrote what she knew, not what she guessed. That mattered. Marcus would later tell her that credibility is built as much by what a witness refuses to exaggerate as by what she proves. Keisha did not write, Harrison stole the necklace. She wrote, I saw Harrison Sterling near the service elevator at approximately 9:35. She did not write, the hotel hates me. She wrote, my badge stopped working at 12:14 the next day. She did not write, they threatened my son. She wrote, a paper bag containing my notebook and an unsigned note was found outside my apartment door at 6:42 in the evening. Malik watched the difference. He saw his mother turn pain into records without letting records flatten her humanity. When she finally stopped typing, the document was 4 pages long. It did not clear her name yet. It did not pay rent. It did not make Harrison afraid. But it existed. And for Keisha, existing on paper was the first refusal to disappear. She stopped there. Harrison Sterling had not been in any summary, but Keisha had seen him. Not in a guest hallway, not near the lobby, near the service elevator on the 14th floor, holding a white access card and talking to the senator's aide. She had not written that down because she had not known it mattered. Now it mattered. It was the thread that would unravel the entire tapestry of his lie. The next morning she went to the public library and scanned the surviving pages of her notebook. The librarian, a tired white woman with silver hair and reading glasses on a chain, showed her how to save the files with timestamps. Keisha scanned 23 pages that day. The next day she scanned 31. By the end of the week she had scanned 142 pages, including room logs, shift notes, and time clock screenshots. Her coworkers had texted her over the months when they were too tired to complain but too angry to forget. Then she made 3 calls. One to a legal aid employment clinic, specifically asking for an attorney who understood the intersection of labor law and racial discrimination. One to a housekeeper named Shanice, who had worked the 14th floor the night before the accusation. One to Mr. Henderson, the retired Black Knight security guard who used to smoke behind the loading dock and knew more about hotel cameras than any executive wanted to admit. The library became their temporary office. Keisha liked the back table near the window because it faced the parking lot and because the outlet worked. Malik brought his school laptop when he could. Tamika came on her lunch break with a plastic folder and a sandwich wrapped in foil. The librarian, whose name tag said Helen Morris, did not ask personal questions after the first day. She only showed Keisha how to scan at higher resolution, how to name files by date, and how to save one copy on a flash drive and another in an email account. Helen had worked at that branch for 31 years. She had seen people come in with eviction notices, immigration forms, unemployment appeals, disability applications, and court letters they were afraid to open. She knew the look of someone trying to build a bridge out of paper. On the fourth day, she slid a small stack of sticky notes across the table and said, "For indexing." Keisha almost cried because kindness that does not ask to be witnessed can be the thing that keeps a person moving. The scans grew into folders, room logs, time records, staff texts, photographs, settlement letter, threat note, locker assignment sheet. Keisha made a master timeline with document names beside every claim. Malik built a spreadsheet because numbers gave him somewhere to put his anger. Tamika called it the truth machine. Keisha called it evidence because she refused to let the story become mystical. Magic did not save working people. Organized facts sometimes did. Growth came slowly, and it came with numbers. After 3 days, Keisha had 2 written statements. After 6 days, she had 5 coworkers willing to confirm that time records were being edited after midnight, a practice that disproportionately affected the Black and Latino housekeeping staff while the white front desk employees received their full logged hours. After 9 days, Shanice found a screenshot showing room 1412 had been assigned to very important person inspection at 8:06 in the evening, almost an hour before Keisha entered. After 12 days, Mr. Henderson explained that the guest hallway camera did not show the service elevator vestibule, but the staff elevator did, and the raw footage was retained for 30 days unless someone exported it. After 14 days, Malik built a simple spreadsheet with columns labeled date, room, time logged, time paid, supervisor initials, and notes. Shanice's statement came first. She had cleaned 1412 the night before, after a private dinner for the senator's donors. She remembered the jewelry pouch because it had been on the dresser beside a half-empty glass of champagne, and she remembered telling the floor supervisor that very important person rooms should not have personal valuables sitting out during staff turnover. The supervisor told her to move faster. Shanice did not move the pouch because housekeepers were trained never to touch jewelry unless it blocked cleaning, and even then they were supposed to call security. Her statement did not prove who took the necklace, but it proved the room had already been poorly controlled. The second statement came from Luis Ortega in maintenance. He had fixed a loose hinge on the service elevator door at 8:40 that night and saw a senator's aide arguing with Harrison near the vestibule. He did not know what they were arguing about. He did know Harrison had a master access card because Harrison used it to send the elevator down without waiting. Luis had not wanted to get involved. He had 2 daughters, a mortgage, and a wife recovering from surgery. Keisha did not shame him for being afraid. Fear was not cowardice when the other side controlled your paycheck. She only asked him to write what he saw and keep a copy somewhere the hotel could not reach. The third statement came from Mr. Henderson, whose first name was Arthur, though almost everyone at the hotel had called him Henderson for 15 years. He had retired after a knee replacement and a disagreement with security management about camera retention. Arthur knew the camera system had blind spots, but he also knew executives often forgot that thumbnails, export logs, and access attempts stayed behind even when footage was moved. Rich people love cameras until cameras look back at them, he told Keisha. It was the first time she laughed in days. By the 9th day, the spreadsheet had become larger than the necklace. It showed time rounding that always favored the hotel. It showed extra room assignments entered after shifts closed. It showed manual adjustments under the same administrator login, often between 12:10 and 12:42 after midnight. It showed that the women most affected were on floors where luxury suites required more cleaning time, but the posted quotas had not changed. The pattern was not loud, that made it stronger. Lies shouted sometimes. Theft of time whispered through columns. Keisha hated that her son had to learn this kind of math, that he had to learn how to navigate a system designed to cheat people who looked like them. But Malik looked up from the laptop, his eyes reflecting the glow of the screen, and said, "Mom, this is not just about the necklace. No, It was never just about the necklace. There were 86 entries where the hotel paid housekeepers less time than their room assignment logs showed. There were 14 nights when women were assigned extra rooms after clockout, their labor stolen to pad the hotel's profit margins. There were 7 signatures from supervisors who said they had never approved the changes. There were 3 housekeepers who had lost eligibility for health benefits because their recorded hours dropped just below the threshold. And there was one pattern Keisha could not ignore. The edits happened after midnight under one manager login. 8. Harrison Sterling, if this kind of slow justice matters to you, do not look away now. Because the numbers are where the story changes. One accusation can be dismissed as personal. 86 altered entries become a pattern powerful people have to fear. Marcus Thorne did not look like the kind of lawyer television teaches people to expect. He did not have a glass office or a wall of mahogany shelves. His legal aid clinic sat above a tax preparation storefront between a nail salon and a place that repaired phones. The waiting room had mismatched chairs, a coffee machine that groaned like it had seen too much, and a bulletin board covered with flyers about wage claims, tenant rights, expungement clinics, and emergency food programs. Marcus listened before he spoke. That was the first reason Keisha trusted him. He did not interrupt her to sound smart. He did not tell her the case was a slam dunk. He did not perform outrage for his own comfort. He asked for dates. He asked for names. He asked who had access to the locker area, who had seen the notebook before it came back wet, who knew about the timeline, who had authority over the service elevator footage, and whether she had sent any accusation in writing before the cease and desist letter arrived. When Keisha finished, Marcus leaned back and rubbed one hand over his jaw. They have power, he said, but power gets sloppy when it thinks the other side is too tired to count. Then he looked at Malik, who had come because Keisha could not afford a sitter for fear. Your mother did something important. She separated what she knows from what she suspects. That is how you build a case. Malik sat straighter. Keisha saw it. She saw a boy learn that dignity was not just refusing to bow. Sometimes dignity was being precise when the world wanted you emotional and messy. Harrison discovered the spreadsheet on a Monday morning because fear travels upward faster than truth. A supervisor who had signed 3 false corrections warned him that Keisha is collecting things. Harrison did not panic. Panic was for people without lawyers, for people without the safety net of generational wealth. He called a meeting with the Sterling Grand's general counsel, the public relations director, and his father Richard, who appeared on the conference room screen from New York, with the distracted expression of a man deciding whether a human problem was large enough to become a financial problem. Inside the hotel, Harrison treated the first warning like a stain on a tablecloth, annoying, visible under the wrong light but removable with the proper staff. He asked Marlene how many housekeepers were speaking with Keisha. He asked security whether anyone had requested old footage. He asked information technology whether employee access logs could be summarized instead of exported. Every question sounded ordinary. Every question bent toward concealment. His assistant, Paige Bell, took notes in a slim tablet while pretending not to understand the weight of them. Paige was 29, ambitious, and terrified of becoming irrelevant in a building where loyalty moved upward and blame moved down. Harrison had taught her how to phrase pressure as concern. Do not write fire her. Write evaluate trust status. Do not write hide the footage. Write preserve brand-sensitive material through proper channels. Do not write threaten the son. Write consider family pressure points. Words in Harrison's office were laundering machines. Richard Sterling was different from his son, but not innocent. He had built hotels by convincing himself that clean summaries were the same as clean operations. He had come from money, lost some in his 20s, rebuilt more in his 40s, and turned discipline into a religion. When workers complained, he believed executives who used charts. When activists protested, he believed public relations teams who called them uninformed. He did not consider himself racist. He considered himself efficient, fair-minded, modern, That self-image was part of the problem. A man who believes he cannot be biased becomes very easy for biased people to use. When Harrison told him Keisha was collecting things, Richard asked the wrong question first. Not, is she telling the truth? Not, what did we fail to check? The first question revealed the center of gravity, reputation before record, growth before repair, brand before woman. Richard would later remember that moment with shame, but shame that comes late does not erase harm. It only decides whether repair is still possible. Is the accusation against the housekeeper solid? Richard asked, his voice echoing slightly through the speakers. Harrison answered smoothly, adjusting his silk tie. The guest's property disappeared during her assigned window. She is the only staff member who had access. Did she return anything? Richard asked. She wrote a self-serving note about an open safe, Harrison replied, dismissing the evidence with a wave of his hand. Richard frowned. A note? A log entry. Easily fabricated, Harrison said. Keisha would have laughed if she had heard that. Easily fabricated. As if a black woman making $15.80 an hour had fabricated 6 months of labor theft in advance, just in case a billionaire's son needed a scapegoat. As if she had the time, the resources, or the foresight to orchestrate a complex conspiracy of wage theft and frame-ups. The arrogance of it was breathtaking. The cease and desist letter arrived on cream paper with the sterling legal seal at the top, as if expensive paper made falsehood cleaner. Marcus scanned it before Keisha even touched it. He moved slowly through each paragraph, circling phrases: defamatory, proprietary, malicious, improperly retained, attempt to interfere. Keisha felt the old pressure in her chest, the feeling that official language could make her own life sound illegal. Then Marcus stopped at the sentence about the 14th floor service elevator. He did not smile immediately. First he looked at the envelope, then the date, then the delivery confirmation, then Keisha's timeline, which she had sent only to his protected clinic email. He asked again whether she had told anyone else the exact time. Keisha said no. Malik said he had not posted anything. Tamika said she had not called the hotel. Marcus asked whether the wet notebook contained that detail. Keisha turned to the page. There it was, written after the fact in the margin, because she had remembered it while drying the pages. Harrison Sterling near service elevator, 935. Marcus placed the page beside the letter. The room became very still. A rich man had tried to prove Keisha was lying by denying a detail he should not have known. In doing so, he had told the truth about his own access to her private notes. It was not the whole case. It was not enough to win by itself, but it changed the shape of everything. The hotel was no longer merely accusing her. The hotel had touched her evidence, read it, damaged it, returned it with a threat, and then answered one of its private details in writing. That was the moment Keisha understood the difference between being angry and having leverage. Harrison's legal team sent Keisha a cease and desist letter that afternoon. It accused her of spreading defamatory claims, unlawfully retaining proprietary hotel documents, and attempting to damage the Sterling family's reputation before an expansion vote. But Harrison added one sentence himself before the letter went out, a sentence born of his own arrogance and assumption of superiority. That sentence would destroy him. The letter stated, "Your false claim that Mr. Sterling accessed the 14th floor service elevator at approximately 9:35 in the evening is malicious, impossible, and not supported by any authorized record." Keisha read that sentence at her kitchen table. Then she read it again. Her timeline had never been public. She had told legal aid she saw Harrison near the service elevator, but she had not posted it, emailed it to the hotel, or included it in any letter to management. Only 3 people knew that detail: Keisha, her legal aid attorney, and whoever had seen the wet notebook before it was returned to her apartment door. The legal aid attorney, a sharp, formidable black man named Marcus Thorne, put the letter flat on his desk the next morning and smiled without happiness. "Keisha," he said, his voice a rich, resonant baritone that commanded the room. "They just admitted they knew what was in your private notes. They just admitted they read your notebook before they returned it to you, which means they had unauthorized access to your personal property, and they just put it in writing." "Is that enough?" Keisha asked, her heart beating a little faster. "It is a door," Marcus said, "and once we have a door, we can kick it down. That is the part worth remembering. Not the anger, not the rumor, not the rich man's confidence. The door opened because Harrison tried to frighten her with a document, and that document carried the fingerprint of his own lie. A door was all Keisha needed. Marcus filed a preservation demand with the hotel, naming the service elevator footage, keycard logs, payroll edits, locker room access records, and all communications about Keisha Vance, room 1412, and the senator's guest complaint. He cited the unauthorized search of her personal property and the specific reference to her private timeline as evidence of bad faith and spoliation of evidence. Harrison responded by trying to close the door harder. He ordered security to overwrite the service elevator footage before the 30-day retention period ended. He told the information technology manager it was routine cleanup. He told human resources to finalize Keisha's termination for loss of trust. He told public relations to brief a friendly business reporter that a disgruntled employee was trying to exploit a guest theft for money, subtly hinting at her race and background to ensure the reporter understood the subtext. The preservation demand was not dramatic to look at. It was 9 pages, with numbered paragraphs, precise document requests, and language that would bore anyone who had never needed paper to defend a life. But to Harrison, it was a fire alarm. It named systems he thought were safely invisible: raw keycard access logs, service elevator camera export history, locker room entry records, human resources notes, payroll edit trails, communications with the senator's staff, draft public relations statements, any reference to Keisha's son, family, finances, or pressure points, any attempt to delete, alter, summarize, overwrite, or selectively retain evidence after receipt of the demand. Marcus sent it by certified email, physical mail, and fax because old systems leave old footprints. He also sent a courtesy copy to the hotel's outside counsel, not because he trusted them, but because trust was irrelevant. Notice was the weapon. Once the hotel had notice, every touch on the record could become part of the story. Harrison did not understand that at first. He thought legal hold was a phrase for lawyers, not a fence around his own hands. He had spent years giving instructions through assistants, summaries, and whispered understandings, letting other people translate intent into action. But a chain of command is still a chain. When Paige asked information technology to conduct routine cleanup, she used the phrase Harrison had given her. When information technology opened the archive, the system logged her employee identifier. When the system rejected the deletion, it did not care that the request came from a sterling assistant. Software can be biased in design, but in that moment, its dumb obedience to logging became useful. The alert did not clear Keisha's name by itself. It did something better. It proved someone with power had tried to touch the very evidence Marcus told them to preserve. It put Harrison's hand on the door he claimed he had never opened. Then he made his fatal mistake. Because Marcus's preservation demand had been sent by certified email and physical mail, every later deletion attempt triggered an automated legal hold alert. The hotel's outside discovery vendor logged the user, time, file path, and reason code when Harrison's assistant tried to erase the footage. The alert read, "Legal hold complac. Surfaces elevator, 14. Request by Eben. 11:40 p.m. The footage itself was damaged by the export attempt, but not gone, and the thumbnail cache showed Harrison Sterling stepping out of the service elevator at 9:34 in the evening, holding a master access card in his left hand and the senator's aide's white garment bag in his right. The raw keycard log showed 3 entries before Keisha's. Very important person inspection access at 8:06 in the evening, executive override at 9:07 in the evening. Service elevator was access at 9:34 in the evening. Keisha's staff key at 9:16 in the evening. That meant the safe could have been opened before she arrived. It meant Harrison had access during the missing window. It meant the hotel summary had not been incomplete by accident. But the necklace was not the deepest truth. The audit trail around the footage led to the payroll edits. The same H. Sterling Edmund credentials had approved after-midnight adjustments, reducing Housekeeper's paid time across 4 properties. Harrison had not stolen housekeeping wages one room at a time with his hands. He had done something cleaner, quieter, and easier to defend in a boardroom. He had made black and brown labor disappear in the software, then called it efficiency. He had weaponized the algorithm to enforce a racial wage gap. Richard Sterling came to Chicago 2 days later. For the first time in 12 years, the billionaire owner walked through the employee entrance instead of the lobby. Nobody clapped, nobody muscled for cameras. A laundry cart squeaked past him with one bad wheel. A black dishwasher stood beside the freight elevator eating crackers from a paper sleeve, because his break had already been swallowed by the dinner rush. A victim of the same systemic theft that had targeted Keisha. Richard's walk through the employee entrance was not redemption. Keisha knew that. A billionaire using the back door one time did not undo years of workers entering through it without being seen. But the walk mattered because it stripped the performance away. There were no lilies in the employee corridor, no pianist, no polished marble, just a time clock, scuffed walls, a bulletin board with expired safety notices, and a line of workers who went quiet when they saw the owner standing where they usually stood. Richard noticed the silence and mistook it for respect at first. Then he saw their faces. Not awe, not gratitude. Calculation. He had spent decades believing his employees were proud to work for the Sterling name. Some were. Pride is complicated when a paycheck feeds your family. But that morning he saw something else under the practiced professionalism. He saw people measuring whether the most powerful man in the building had come to count the truth or manage the scandal. Arthur Henderson stood by the loading dock with a cane and did not move aside quickly. Richard almost smiled at him with the public face, then seemed to think better of it. Arthur said, "You should have walked this hallway before somebody had to drag you down here with a legal hold." No one laughed. Richard did not answer. He kept walking. Keisha met Richard in a plain conference room with Marcus, 2 housekeepers, a union organizer, and a court reporter. Harrison sat at the far end with his lawyer, his face pale but still arranged into insulted innocence, the look of a man who believed his privilege would protect him from the consequences of his actions. Richard looked older in person, not kind, not cruel, just smaller than his buildings, a man who had built an empire on the backs of people he never truly saw. "I want to understand what happened," he said, his voice lacking the booming authority he used in public speeches. Keisha placed the blue notebook on the table. The pages had dried unevenly, curled at the edges, but her mother's handwriting remained on the first page, a testament to the generations of women who had fought this fight before her. "You wanted summaries," Keisha said, her voice clear and unwavering. "Summaries are where people like me disappear. Summaries are where you hide the truth so you do not have to look at it. But I am not a summary, Mr. Sterling. I am a person, and my name is on these pages." Harrison's lawyer started to object, raising a hand to interrupt. Richard raised one hand, silencing his lawyer. "Let her speak." Keisha continued, her eyes locked on Richard, but her words aimed at the entire system he represented. "I am not asking you to feel sorry for me. Pity is cheap, and I do not need it. I am asking you to correct what your name made possible. Your son accused me in a hallway full of cameras. He suspended me in a letter. He let my neighbors hear I was a thief, playing on the oldest, ugliest stereotypes about black women. He offered me money to say the records did not exist, to erase my history to protect his future. My name is not cleared until the record is corrected. Not just my name for the necklace, my name for the hours you stole, my name for the dignity you tried to strip away." Keisha did not tell the story quickly in the conference room. Speed would have helped the men who wanted to reduce it. She began with the night of the room. Then she moved backward to 6 months of hours. Then forward to the suspension. Then the settlement. Then the wet notebook. Then the cease and desist letter. She did not call Harrison a thief. She did not need to. She showed where he had access, where he had motive, where his own words crossed the line from denial into knowledge. Marlene Dodd sat 2 chairs away and cried without sound. Keisha did not comfort her. That was not cruelty. It was boundaries. Marlene had signed schedule changes she knew were wrong. She had told women to be patient when their checks were short. She had let Harrison use her as a soft wall between management and the workers. Her tears might have been real, but real tears do not repair false records. Luis spoke next. His hands shook once, so he clasped them on the table. He described the service elevator, the white access card, the argument with the senator's aide. Harrison's lawyer asked whether Luis could be mistaken about the time. Luis pulled out his own maintenance ticket, printed from the hotel system before his access was cut. The ticket closed at 8:46. The service elevator call log showed a manual override at 9:34. Luis said, "I cannot tell you what Mr. Sterling did in that room. I can tell you he was there when the summary says he was not." Shanice spoke about the jewelry pouch. Arthur spoke about the camera retention. Malik did not speak until Richard asked who built the spreadsheet. Keisha almost stopped him, wanting to protect her son from that room. But Malik looked at her and she nodded. "I did," he said. "My mother had the records. I put them in order." Richard looked at the spreadsheet on the screen. 86 wage discrepancies, 14 off-clock room additions, 7 supervisor signature conflicts, 3 benefit losses, 1 administrator login, Harrison's login. Malik did not raise his voice. "This is not a misunderstanding. Misunderstandings do not repeat in the same direction 86 times. For the first time, Harrison looked at the boy, not as a child, as a threat. The room went quiet. The hum of the air conditioner seemed to grow louder. Marcus slid the legal hold alert across the table. Then the keycard log. Then the payroll adjustment report. Then the draft public relations memo with tracked changes from Harrison's assistant, describing Keisha as financially vulnerable and likely to accept quiet resolution if pressure is applied through family concerns. Richard read that line twice. Pressure through family concerns. For 1 second, Keisha saw a father look at a son and recognize not a mistake but a method. He saw the rot at the core of his family's legacy. Harrison spoke for the first time, his voice tight with defensive anger. "Dad, this is being exaggerated. I was protecting the brand. I was protecting this hotel from a scandal that could cost us millions. She is just an employee. We can replace her. We cannot replace the senator's trust." Keisha looked at him, her gaze piercing through his carefully constructed facade. "No, you were protecting yourself with other people's names. You were protecting your promotion by sacrificing a black woman who had no power to fight back. You thought I would take the money and disappear because that is what you think people like me do. You thought my dignity had a price tag, and you were wrong." Richard did not apologize then. Keisha was grateful for that. An apology too early would have been another way to rush past the damage, another way to avoid the real work of repair. Instead, Marcus put a written repair demand on the table. 1. Immediate written retraction of the theft accusation, delivered to staff, security, the senator's office, and any media contact, briefed by the hotel. 2. Keisha Vance's employment record corrected, with suspension removed and lost wages restored. 3. Independent payroll audit across all Sterling Grand properties for the previous 18 months. 4. Back pay fund administered by an outside trustee, not the hotel. 5. Worker access to their own room logs, time edits, and badge records. 6. Legal protection against retaliation for every employee who gave statements. 7. Harrison Sterling removed from operational authority pending board investigation. 8. Public report within 90 days. 4. Independent review of the necklace complaint, including raw access logs and a written finding that Keisha Vance was not the person responsible for the missing property. 5. Immediate reinstatement of health coverage for any worker whose eligibility had been affected by edited hours. 6. A third-party payroll audit covering 18 months, not just the weeks management found convenient. 7. A worker records policy giving employees the right to request their own room assignments, time edits, and supervisor changes without retaliation. 8. Payment of back wages, interest, and lawful penalties through an independently administered fund. 9. A written ban on confidentiality clauses that hide wage theft or false accusations. 10. Removal of Harrison Sterling from operational authority during the investigation. Keisha added one more item herself. It was not in Marcus' first draft. She wrote it in blue ink at the bottom of the page. 11. A correction letter must be sent wherever the accusation traveled. Marcus had looked at her when she wrote it. That might be hard to define. Keisha said, so was the rumor. They managed to spread that just fine. In the conference room, Richard read the 11th demand longer than the others. Rich people understand money. They understand resignations. They understand audits. But correction is harder because correction follows humiliation back through the rooms where it was planted. It requires a powerful person to say, not only were we wrong, but we were wrong about someone who could not defend herself equally when we said it. Keisha watched him read, and she knew that demand frightened him more than the fund. Harrison's lawyer whispered to him. Harrison shook his head, his face red with indignation. This is extortion. I will not sign this. Richard stared at the list, the weight of the evidence pressing down on him. This will damage the expansion deal, he said quietly. Marcus did not blink. The damage already happened, Mr. Sterling. This is just the first time it would be counted. You can either control the narrative now, or the narrative will control you in court. Keisha touched the notebook. What you break in public, she said, cannot be repaired in private. You cannot buy my silence with a check when the truth is already on paper. Richard looked at her for a long time, really looking at her, perhaps for the first time in his life. He saw the exhaustion, the resilience, the unbreakable core of a woman who had been pushed to the edge and refused to fall. Then he signed the audit order. Not because he had become a hero, because Keisha had brought the truth to a table where ignoring it would now cost more than admitting it. The justice did not arrive like thunder. It arrived as documents. A retraction letter on sterling grand letterhead, formally clearing Keisha of any wrongdoing. A corrected personnel file expunging the suspension. A payroll audit notice posted beside the staff time clock, visible to every employee who walked through the doors. A board resolution removing Harrison from executive authority, stripping him of the power he had weaponized. A court-filed agreement preserving all keycard data, room logs, and payroll edits. A trustee notice explaining how workers could claim back pay without signing confidentiality agreements. The first retraction went to staff. It was not enough at first. The draft said the matter had been resolved, and there was no evidence of wrongdoing by Keisha Vance. Marcus rejected it. Keisha rejected it faster. No, she said. That sounds like you looked for guilt and did not find enough. Write that the accusation was false. Write that the hotel relied on incomplete and misleading records. Write that my room log was accurate. The second draft was better, but it still used passive voice. Errors were made. Records were incomplete. Communications were unclear. Keisha circled the phrases and pushed the paper back. Records did not incomplete themselves. The third draft named the actions. The hotel failed to review raw access logs before suspending Keisha Vance. The hotel circulated an internal account that wrongly implied she had stolen guest property. The hotel has corrected her employment record and withdrawn all adverse findings. Keisha sat with that sentence for a long time. It did not erase the days Malik walked through school under suspicion. It did not erase the neighbor looking away. It did not erase the wet notebook. But it put a wall of paper where the lie had been standing. The public report took longer because institutions move slowly when truth costs money. Workers were interviewed off-site. Payroll data was exported under supervision. The third-party auditor found edits not only in Chicago but in Milwaukee, Atlanta, and Scottsdale. Some managers claimed they did not understand the effect of the edits. Some claimed the system did it automatically. But the audit trail showed manual approvals, repeated patterns, and administrator overrides. The numbers did not cry, they did not accuse, they simply stood there, patient and devastating. Richard signed the worker records policy in a room with no cameras allowed. Keisha had refused a publicity event. She did not want to become a poster for the hotel's redemption. She wanted the repair to function when no one was clapping. The independent trustee, a former state labor investigator named Denise Alvarez, took control of the fund. Back wages would be calculated from room assignment records, not management summaries. Employees could challenge the calculation. Translators would be provided. Retaliation complaints would go directly to the trustee. The policy was not perfect, no policy is, but it gave workers a handle on a door that had been locked from the other side. The final public report, released 92 days later because rich people still know how to delay, found 2,843 unpaid labor hours across 4 hotels. It found 31 employees improperly dropped below benefit thresholds, the vast majority of them Black and brown women. It found that Harrison Sterling had personally approved the investigation summary, blaming Keisha before the raw access logs were reviewed. It found that the senator's wife had later located the necklace in a garment bag shipped to Washington. But Harrison had not corrected the accusation, because, by then, Keisha's guilt had become useful to his narrative. Harrison resigned from the company board. The expansion deal was postponed. The hospitality school removed the Sterling family name from a scholarship luncheon until the worker fund was complete. Harrison's resignation statement used the language of men who are not ready to confess. He said he was stepping away to prevent distraction. He said he remained proud of the Sterling legacy. He said luxury hospitality depends on trust. Keisha read it once and placed it in the file. She did not need him to become honest in public for her to know what the documents had proved. Still, the board minutes mattered. Removed from operational authority. Expansion vote delayed pending governance review. Outside counsel retained for possible referral. Those phrases were not poetry, but they had weight. The senator's wife recovered her necklace 2 months later through a private insurance inquiry. It had never been stolen by staff. A junior aide had moved the jewelry pouch into a campaign luggage case after a donor dinner, then failed to report it because he feared his own job. That discovery did not make Harrison's actions harmless. It made them worse. He had not needed a real thief. He had needed a convenient one. Keisha's name had been placed under suspicion not because evidence pointed at her, but because evidence had been too inconvenient to gather. When the amended complaint reached Keisha, Marcus asked whether she wanted to pursue more. There were paths: defamation, retaliation, privacy, wage claims. Some would take years. Some might settle. Some might reopen wounds. Malik had only begun to heal. Keisha did not answer immediately. She had learned that justice is not one door. It is a hallway, and every door costs something to open. In the end, she chose the claims that repaired the record and funded the worker center. She did not forgive Harrison. Forgiveness to her was not a requirement placed on people after they survive harm. She chose not to spend the rest of her life orbiting his name. There was a difference, and Keisha did not become rich. That mattered, because this was not a fairy tale where a billionaire writes a check and the poor black woman smiles for the camera, grateful for the crumbs that fall from the master's table. Keisha received back pay, damages under the agreement, and a corrected record. She kept her job only long enough to train 2 housekeepers on the new log access system, ensuring they knew how to protect themselves, then accepted a position with the worker center, helping hotel employees document wage claims. The worker center opened in a narrow storefront 6 blocks from the hotel, between a barbershop and a place that sold used office furniture. It had secondhand desks, donated chairs, 2 old printers, a scanner from Helen's library surplus sale, and a sign in the window that said "Rake help on Tuesdays and Thursdays." Keisha did not run it alone. Shanice volunteered on Saturdays. Luis helped workers understand maintenance tickets. Arthur taught a monthly session called Cameras Remember More Than Managers Admit. Marcus came twice a month for legal intake. Malik built a simple template that workers could use to track hours, rooms, breaks, and supervisor changes. The first person through the door was a dishwasher from another hotel who had 3 pay stubs and no idea why his overtime disappeared. Keisha made coffee, sat across from him, and asked him to tell the story slowly. He apologized for not having everything organized. Keisha slid a folder toward him. "That is why we start," she said. "Not because everything is ready. Because something is true." Week by week, the center became a place for small truths. A cafeteria worker with unpaid prep time, a hotel doorman accused of scratching a car he had never parked, a laundry attendant whose badge scans showed she worked through breaks, a night cleaner whose supervisor changed her clock-out time after she complained about mold. Not every case became a victory. Keisha never promised that. False hope is another kind of disrespect, but every person left with copies, dates, next steps, and the feeling that their story had been received by someone who knew how heavy paper could be. The blue notebook sat on her new desk, not as a weapon anymore, but as a witness. A testament to the power of the written word, to the legacy of her mother, to the strength of a community that refused to be erased. One evening in late October, Malik came home from his first community college class and found Keisha at the kitchen table, repairing the notebook cover with fresh tape. The apartment was still small. The Toyota still made a coughing sound on cold mornings. The electric bill was paid, but carefully. Nothing had turned magical. Everything had been possible. The systemic barriers were still there, the racial biases still lurking in the corners of the world. But they had been pushed back, just a little, by the force of her truth. Malik's first semester did not become easy. He still worked part-time at a grocery store on weekends. He still worried about money. He still flinched when unknown numbers called his mother's phone. But something in him had shifted. He had watched a lie move through a hotel, a school, a neighborhood, and then he had watched records pull it back by the roots. He no longer believed fairness happened automatically to people who deserved it. He believed fairness had to be built, argued, documented, and defended. It was a harder belief, but a sturdier one. For his ethics paper, he interviewed Keisha at the kitchen table. He asked when she had been most afraid. She told him it was not the meeting with Harrison, not the legal letter, not even the wet notebook. It was the moment she almost wanted the $8,000 more than she wanted the correction. Malik looked startled. "Really? Really?" she said, "because that was the moment I understood how they expected to win. Not by proving I was wrong, by making survival so expensive that silence looked responsible." He wrote that down. Then he asked what changed her mind. Keisha touched the blue notebook, your grandmother's handwriting, and you. The apartment was still the same apartment. The radiator still clanged, the table still wobbled, the bills still came. But the air had changed. They were not safe in the way rich people use that word, meaning protected from consequences. They were safe in a quieter way. They had told the truth, and the truth had a file number, a letterhead, a policy, a fund, and a place where other people could bring their own records. Malik set a paper beside her. It was an essay for his ethics class. At the top, he had written, "A name is not cleared until the record is corrected." Keisha looked at the line in her mother's words, then at her son's handwriting, and for the first time in months, she let herself cry without defeated. She cried for the hours lost, for the fear endured, for the mother who had taught her to write it down, and for the son who was learning to read the world clearly. The next morning, at the Sterling Grand Staff entrance, a new sign hung beside the time clock. Employees may request copies of room assignment logs, keycard summaries, and payroll edits. Retaliation for record requests is prohibited. Questions may be sent to the independent worker trustee. Shanice took a picture of it and sent it to Keisha. Under the photo, she wrote, "You made the paper see us." Keisha smiled, a deep, genuine smile that reached her eyes. Then she opened the worker center for the day, made coffee in a dented metal pot, and waited for the first person who had been told their hours did not count. Because dignity is not something powerful people hand back when they feel generous. Dignity is what ordinary people protect for each other. One record, one witness, one corrected name at a time. Justice does not begin when power feels sorry. Justice begins when the lie is corrected where the lie was written, on paper, in public, with a name restored. If stories about ordinary people standing their ground still mean something to you, take a moment to subscribe. This channel is built for stories where dignity matters, truth has a cost, and the quietest person in the room may be the one worth listening to. And tell me in the comments, if you were Keisha and $8,000 could protect your son's future, would you have signed the silence agreement? Or would you have risked everything to make them correct your name? Keisha Vance would spend the rest of her life making sure the paper saw them all.